Okay, so we're ready to deploy to Heroku. Now, just a couple small things I want to do. I'm going to set this environment back to development in my .env, and then make sure that in your git ignore you have your .env in here, because you don't want to push that. What we do is, instead of using the .env variables on Heroku, you can actually go into the back end within your settings in the Heroku platform, and you can create your environment variables there. So you want to do that for security reasons. Also, if you're pushing to GitHub, you don't want to include that .env. Another thing we don't want to include is our build folder. Now, with React, it just, it has production, just /build. However, our build folder is in front end. So we're going to do /frontend/build. Now, you might be asking, why aren't we pushing this to Heroku? I just showed you that we're loading the build index.html. Well, instead of actually pushing this ourselves, what we'll do is we'll add in the package.json what's called a Heroku post script or post build script. And we're going to set it so that it runs npm run build on the server, and then it builds it on the server when you're pushing it, when you're deploying it. That way we don't have to worry about running npm run build. It will do it on the server. And you don't have to do it that way, but that's the way I like to do it. That's easier. We don't have to deal with the build folder. In fact, we can just delete it. So we can completely get rid of that build folder. All right, now before we actually add that, let's get set up with Heroku. So I'm going to close this stuff up. So you have to create an account, obviously. So once you create an account and log in, and what we're doing here is free. If you are going into production and you think you're going to have a lot of users, you definitely want to look at a paid tier of Heroku. So from here, you'll be able to see your applications. This is just one of, I think I have like 4 or 5 Heroku accounts. I have this one Python application here. So when we push to Heroku, we'll be able to see our application here. Now, to do that, to actually access Heroku from the terminal, we're going to use the Heroku CLI. So you can use this, Mac, Windows, Linux. If you're on a Mac, as I am, Homebrew is the best way to install this. And if you don't have Homebrew, you can go to brew.sh and just simply copy this right here and run that right in your terminal. So you can open up a terminal, paste that in, run it, and you'll have Homebrew installed. Once you have Homebrew installed, you can then copy this command and run that, and it'll install the Heroku CLI. Now, I already have it. You'll see if I do Heroku --version, I already have it installed, but just run that if you're on Mac. If you're on Windows, just download the installer and just click Next, go through the whole thing, and then you should have access to the Heroku command. If you're on Ubuntu, you can install it here. You can use other package managers as well. I'm sure you Linux guys can figure it out. Linux guys or girls, I should say. All right, so get that installed, and then let's go to our terminal here. First thing we want to do is log in with Heroku. So we'll say Heroku. Make sure you're in your root here too. So Heroku login, and we can press any key and it will open up a browser, and just click on login. So now I should be logged in. If we go back here, you can see I'm logged in as traversymedia@gmail. Now I want to create a new application. So I'm going to say Heroku create, and then we can name this. Now this name has to be unique. If someone else has used it, you can't use it. So I'm going to use ProShop app, which I believe is not taken. We'll go ahead and try it. Okay, so that worked. You'll have to do something else. Maybe just do like ProShop app and then a bunch of numbers. So here it shows us the Git repository. It also shows us the actual URL to the application. So if I command or control click here, it's going to open it up, and we're just going to see Heroku, welcome to your new app. So we haven't pushed anything to the server yet. All we've done is created just basically an empty boilerplate app. And if you go back to this page here in Heroku and you reload, you're going to see your application here, and you have all these tabs here that you can mess with. You can see your activity and all that. So before we actually push to Heroku using Git, there's just a couple things we need to do. So one, we need to add what's called a proc file or a pros file, and it just basically tells Heroku what to run, you know, to run our application. So we're going to put this right in the root here and just create a file, and it's just going to be uppercase P proc file like that. And you can see it even has a little Heroku icon. So we want to say web : and then how do we want to run this? We want to run node backend / index.js. So that's going to run, not index, so what we called it server.js. All right, now the next thing I want to do is add that post build script that I told you about. So we want to do the npm install in the client and npm run build. We want to do that on Heroku on the server when we deploy. So here we can say Heroku post build, just like that. And then we're going to do a couple things here. We need to set npm _config _production. I can't talk and type at the same time. We're going to set that to false because we won't be able to run this npm install and npm run dev if we're in production already. Now it'll go back to production afterwards, but we need to set that to false first. Then we want to do npm install, and we want to run this in the client. It's going to run npm install on the server by default, but we want to specify that we want to run this on the client. So remember, we can do prefix client, or not client, we called our folder front end. Whatever you called this, if you call it front end, you want that. If you called it client, you can put client. So we want to prefix it with front end, and then double ampersand. So and we want to run npm run build, and that's also on the front end. So -- prefix, and then that's going to be front end as well. Okay, so again, it's just going to temporarily set this npm config production to false, and then it's going to go into the front end folder and run npm install. It's also going to run npm run build, which will then create that build folder that has the index.html file in it. And we'll see all that happen when we actually push to Heroku. So I'm going to save this. Now you want to make sure you commit everything that you've done. So if you, I hope you have a Git repository. You should have been making commits through the whole course. If you haven't, that's okay. Just install Git and initialize it with git init if you haven't already. And then I'm going to go ahead and say git add all. Make sure you're in your root, not your front end. So I'm going to add all to the staging area, and then I want to commit those changes. So I'm going to say git commit -m, and I'm going to say prepare for deployment. All right, so now I should have everything ready in my repository. So now I want to add Heroku as a remote repository. So back in this page here, if we go to deploy and we go down here, so this command here, Heroku git remote, and then we want to add this. So I'm going to copy this command and paste that in right here. So that'll add it as a remote repository. And then the only thing we have left to do is push. So let's say git push Heroku, and we want to push to the master branch. So git push Heroku master. And anytime you're ready to push your changes to production, you just add them to your repository, and then you just run this again. So this is going to take everything we have except for whatever is in the git ignore, and it's going to push it. It's going to install our dependencies. So right now it's doing npm install in the root in the server. So it's installing all of this stuff here. Then it's going to run our post build script. So it'll run npm install in the front end now, and npm run build in the front end. And we should see that here. It should say, creating production build. Might take a minute or two. Okay, so now you can see creating an optimized production build. So instead of us having to run it and then pushing it. We're just having the server do it, which is nice. It takes that step out of our whole deployment process. Okay, so now we saw build succeeded, compressing, and we should be just about done. And I just want to mention that it's not going to work right away because everything that's in our .env is not going to be accessible. We have to add those within the back end of Heroku. All right, so let's just go back to the URL here, whatever your URL is, and reload. And it's probably going to say application error. So we see application error, and if you want to know what's going on, you can do Heroku logs, and you can actually have that keep running with this -- tail. So let's go down here and let's say Heroku logs. And let's just go up here. So we're getting this error here that says the URI parameter must be a string got undefined. So basically our Mongoose Connect, where we're connecting to our database, it got undefined. And the reason for that is it's looking at process.env.mongoURI, which right now doesn't exist because this file, this .env, did not get pushed because we put that in our git ignore. So anything that could break by not having these values here is going to break. So what we'll do is just want to scroll down here and clear this up. And anytime you have issues, just do Heroku logs. So what we need to do is go into our Heroku settings here, and you'll see config vars. And if we reveal, we don't have any, so we just need to add our environment variables here. So we have one for node_env, and I'm going to set that to production. And we shouldn't have to do a port because I think it uses 5,000 by default, but we'll just add this anyways. And then we want our Mongo_URI, and that we can get from here. Or it doesn't run on 5,000, but there's a proxy. But it initially runs on 5,000, and then there's a proxy to run it on port 80. Okay, so that's our Mongo URI. Next, we want our JWT secret, and that can be anything. I'll just put like a bunch of numbers and letters. So add, and then finally we have the PayPal client ID, which I'm going to grab here. Okay, paste that in, and it's PayPal client ID. So those are our environment variables. I'm going to click, actually I don't think we have to click anything, just add that, and then that should be all set. So now I'm going to go back here and reload, and it might just take a minute. And there we go. So now everything should work in our deployed application. The best thing to do now is just to test some things out. And I'm using the same browser, so my same user is logged in. Let's just go ahead and log out. And I just want to kind of go through, make sure all the pages load. So we have our reviews here. And we're using the same database. That's something else that I want to mention. We're using our Atlas database, and a lot of times you might have a development database and a production database, and you would go and add your production database here instead. Okay, and I believe that Heroku does have like a module you can run that will run MongoDB locally on their server, but I believe it has to be a paid tier. I know they do it with Postgres. I think they do it with MongoDB. Don't quote me on that, but if they do, it's going to be on a paid tier. But I just usually use MongoDB Atlas. But what I want to do here is just kind of test things out. So let's add this to our cart. Proceed to checkout. We have to sign in. So I'm going to sign in as John. And it's the same users again because we're using the same database. and this was in my local storage still. Okay, place order. We should see the pay button. And this is going to go through the PayPal sandbox. I already have my demo account selected, so I'm going to just pay now. And then this should reload and we should get paid. Good. So now that order went through. So now we would log in as our admin. And if we go to products, not products, orders, we can see the last one here is going to be that order. If I click details, mark as delivered, and now that's been set to delivered. All right, so everything pretty much seems to work. We haven't tested everything. Let's try a review here. This is a great phone. Submit, review submitted. Okay, there it is. And I shouldn't be able to submit another one. Cool. All right, let's try search. Okay. So we now have a completely custom e-commerce application. And I really hope you guys enjoyed this course. I know that it was long. Whenever I do one of these large project courses, it gets to be really long and kind of tedious. So if you made it through, congratulations. That's friggin' awesome. You're in a very small percentage of people that make it through a course like this. A lot of people just kind of take what they need and move on. But if you completed the whole thing, deployed it, that's awesome. Feel free to add to it, make it better, make it your own, use it on your portfolio. And again, I hope you enjoyed this course, and I hope I see you in the next one. Thanks.